The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse apartment in Manhattan's Upper East Side. I stood there, clutching a steaming mug of coffee, watching the city lights blur through the water streaks. Everything I thought I knew about my life was about to become just as distorted. Marcus's voice cut through the ambient sound of the storm, carrying that tone I'd learned to dread over our 12 years of marriage. Cold, calculated, and utterly devoid of emotion, I turned to face my husband. This man I'd built a life with, raised 2 children with, and supported through every career milestone. At 45, Marcus still carried himself with the confidence that had first attracted me. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his Italian suit immaculate despite the late hour. But tonight, something was different. "Let me guess," I said, setting down my mug. "Another business trip? Or are we finally going to address the elephant that's been trampling through our living room for the past 6 months?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Julia, I've been thinking about us, about our future." "Funny, because I've been thinking about that too. Especially after Rebecca Chen mentioned seeing you at the plaza last Tuesday, with a woman who definitely wasn't me." The color drained from Marcus's face, but he recovered quickly. It was one of his talents, the ability to shift gears when one strategy wasn't working. "That was a client meeting," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "A client meeting at the plaza's champagne bar at 9 p.m.? Marcus, I may have given up my career in forensic accounting to raise Emma and Jake, but I didn't give up my brain." Marcus walked to his home bar and poured himself 3 fingers of 18-year-old Macallan. "I want a divorce, Julia?" There it was. The words I'd been expecting. Yet they still hit me like a physical blow. "I see." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "And how long have you been planning this announcement?" He took a long sip before answering. "We've grown apart, Julia. We're different people than we were when we got married." Different people. I laughed without humor. "You mean you've become someone who can look his wife in the eye every morning knowing he's planning to leave her?" "Don't make this about the kids," Marcus snapped, showing the first crack in his facade. "They'll be fine. Kids are resilient. But sure, let's blow up their world." Marcus set down his glass with more force than necessary. "This isn't working, Julia. We both know it." He wasn't entirely wrong, and that stung worse than his betrayal. Our marriage had become a choreographed dance of avoidance. We attended galas together, hosted dinner parties, maintained the perfect image. But when was the last time we'd really talked? "So what happens now?" I asked. Marcus's expression shifted, and I saw something I didn't recognize. Not guilt or sadness. Calculation. The same look he got when working complex financial deals. "I've already retained counsel," he said. "Patricia Whitman at Harrison Cole and Associates." "Julia, I want this to be as smooth as possible. For everyone's sake smooth." I felt the words' sharp edges. My former forensic accountant instincts pricked up. I recognized the subtle signs of someone who thought they were being clever. "I think we should aim for an amicable settlement. We can handle this maturely." "Meaning what? Exactly?" "We divide things fairly. You keep the apartment. I'll find something else. We'll work out custody for Jake. Emma will be in college soon, and we'll handle the financial aspects reasonably." The financial aspects. He said it so casually, with just a hint of smugness that made my skin crawl. "And what do you consider reasonable?" He moved to the windows. "The firm's structure, the investment portfolios, it's not like we can divide them with a calculator." Alarm bells were ringing. I knew our financial situation better than he thought I did. Something about his tones suggested there were aspects I didn't know about. "I think the best approach would be for you to take a lump sum settlement. Clean break, no ongoing complications." "A lump sum?" I stood beside him at the window. In the reflection, I could see his face, and that calculating expression was back. "How generous of you to simplify things for me." "I'm trying to be fair, Julia. Are you dragging it out?" "You mean like if I hired my own forensic accountant to examine our finances? That kind of dragging it out?" The muscle in Marcus's jaw ticked. "There's no need for that kind of investigation. We can handle this between ourselves." "You know what, Marcus? You're absolutely right. We can handle this between ourselves." I smiled, and I saw him relax slightly. "I'll represent myself." "That's not what I meant." "Oh, I know exactly what you meant." I walked toward the bedroom. "You want me to roll over and accept whatever scraps you're willing to throw my way?" "Julia," I paused at the doorway, "but here's the thing. Marcus, you seem to have forgotten who you married." The silence was deafening. Marcus stood frozen by the window, suddenly realizing he might have seriously miscalculated. "Sweet dreams," I said, and closed the bedroom door, but I didn't go to bed. Instead, I sat at my laptop and began making lists. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, business partnerships, property holdings. I'd trusted Marcus to handle our financial planning. I had 12 pages of questions and a preliminary list of forensic accountants in the city. I also had something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Marcus thought he could outsmart me. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The law offices of Catherine Morrison occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming midtown tower. Catherine was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and an even sharper suit. Mrs. Blackwood, she stood as I entered her corner office. I understand you're interested in my services. My husband informed me 3 days ago that he wants a divorce. He's already retained Patricia Whitman. Catherine's eyebrows rose. Patricia's good. Your husband isn't taking any chances. Neither am I. I'd compiled everything I could legally access from our joint accounts and shared documents. What I'd found had made my stomach turn. Catherine scanned the documents, her expression growing more interested with each page. I was a forensic accountant before marriage, specialized in asset recovery and hidden wealth investigations. Ah, Catherine's smile became genuine. That explains the thoroughness. Most clients come to me with a shoebox of receipts and hurt feelings. I have plenty of hurt feelings, but I also have questions that need answers. I'd organized my suspicions into clear points, such as why our joint tax returns show Marcus's business income as significantly lower than what the firm actually generates. Why there are quarterly transfers to something called estate planning services transfers I never signed off on, and why Marcus is so eager for a quick lump sum settlement. Those are very good questions. Catherine made notes. What's the time frame? He hasn't filed yet. He's giving me time to think things over and make the right decision. And will you? I met her gaze steadily. I spent 10 years helping wronged spouses find hidden money. I'm not about to let my own ex hide assets from me. Catherine nodded. Approvingly, if your suspicions are correct, we need to move fast. The moment Marcus realizes you're not going to roll over, he'll start moving money. She pulled out her phone. I'm putting you in touch with David Chen, best forensic accountant I work with, former FBI Financial Crimes Unit. How long will that take? Depends on sophistication. Could be weeks, could be months. But Julia, if you're serious about this, you need to understand we're declaring war. I thought about Marcus's smug confidence. The years I'd trusted him while he potentially deceived me. The woman at the plaza? Good, I said, because I'm tired of being the only one playing fair. 2 days later, I met David Chen at a cafe in Soho. He was younger than expected, maybe 35, with intense energy. He'd already reviewed my preliminary documents. Your husband's been busy, David said, sliding a folder across the table. Take a look. I opened it to find a diagram. That looked like a spider web. Corporate entities connected by lines with Marcus's name at the center. What am I looking at? A preliminary corporate structure map? Your husband has interests in at least 12 different entities. Some are legitimate, but others appear to be shell companies. No real business operations, just vehicles for moving money. My hands tightened on the folder. Moving it where? That's what we need to find out. I found references to accounts in the Cayman Islands, a trust in Delaware, and a holding company in Switzerland. The coffee in my mouth turned to ash. Switzerland. Established 2 years ago, right when your husband's firm landed that major pension fund contract. My guess is significant fees never made it onto your joint tax returns. I stared at the diagram, seeing my marriage through new eyes. How much are we talking about? Hard to say without deeper investigation, but potentially millions, maybe tens of millions. The number hit like a physical blow. While I'd been clipping coupons, my husband had potentially been hiding enough money to buy a small island. Can you prove it? David's smile was predatory. With enough time and the right legal tools, I can prove anything. Question is, how far are you willing to go? As far as it takes. Good. We'll need court orders, subpoenas, maybe federal agency cooperation. Whatever it takes. David pulled out his phone. I'll start with domestic accounts first. I'll also need authorization forms so I can act on your behalf. There's one more thing. David's expression grew serious. Once we start pulling these threads, your husband will know something's up. He might try to move assets, liquidate accounts, maybe even leave the country. The thought of Marcus fleeing with millions made my blood boil. What can we do? Emergency. Court orders freezing his accounts, all of them. Every bank account, investment portfolio, and corporate entity we can identify. Can we do that? If we can show substantial risk of asset dissipation, yes. Based on what I'm seeing, that shouldn't be difficult. I felt a surge of the thrill I'd loved about forensic accounting, the intellectual challenge, the satisfaction of uncovering lies, the justice of accountability. When do we start? David grinned. We already have. That evening, Marcus was hunched over his computer with unusual intensity. He looked up when I entered and something flickered across his face. guilt, worry. "How was your day?" he asked, closing his laptop too quickly. "Productive. I met with a divorce attorney. Catherine Morrison." Marcus's composure slipped. "Catherine Morrison, Julia. She's very aggressive." "Are you sure? As opposed to accepting whatever settlement you think I deserve?" "That's not what I meant, isn't it, Marcus? Can I ask you something?" "Of course. In your ideal scenario, how much of our marital assets would I walk away with?" The question caught him off guard. It would depend on various factors. Business valuations, tax implications, ... double quotes. "Give me a percentage." "Julia, it's not that simple. Give me a percentage, Marcus." After a long moment, "Maybe 25%, 30, 25%. Of assets I now suspected were far larger than I'd known, I kept my expression neutral. "That seems reasonable," I said. Relief flooded Marcus's face. "Really? I was worried you might fight over every penny." "Oh, don't worry about that," I said, standing. "I'm not interested in fighting over pennies." The next morning, Catherine called. "David's preliminary report is even more damaging than we hoped. Evidence of systematic asset concealment going back 5 years. I'm filing for emergency relief this afternoon." Emergency relief, temporary restraining orders, freezing all accounts associated with your husband's business entities, plus complete financial disclosure within 72 hours. That afternoon, I maintained normalcy while my world was being systematically torn apart and rebuilt. When we got home, Marcus's car was there. Unusual for a Thursday. Through the kitchen window, I saw lights in his study. Marcus appeared as we entered, pale and disheveled, holding legal documents. "Julia," he said, voice tight with anger. "We need to talk now." I sent the kids to order pizza, then followed Marcus into his study. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He waved the documents. "Asset freezing orders, financial disclosure requirements. Are you out of your mind?" I settled into my chair with deliberate calm. "I'm protecting my interests. Just like you've been protecting yours? This is scorched earth. Julia, do you know what you've done? I have clients, business partners, employees. Maybe you should have thought about that before hiding assets in Swiss bank accounts." The color drained completely from Marcus's face. Who told you about ... About the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the Delaware Trust? "Marcus, you seem to have forgotten what I used to do for a living." Marcus sank into his chair, suddenly looking older. "Julia, you don't understand. The business is complicated. I'm sure there are legitimate reasons, and I'm sure a federal judge will be interested in hearing about them." "Federal judge?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Some of your financial activities caught FBI attention? Something about potential tax evasion and money laundering? But I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. You're bluffing, am I? By the way, you have 72 hours for complete financial disclosure. All accounts, all entities, all assets." And Marcus, "I'd recommend being very thorough, because if we find undisclosed assets, divorce court won't be your only worry." I left him staring at the scattered documents and went to help my children order pizza. For the first time in months, I actually had an appetite. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray Monday in downtown Manhattan. Walking up the courthouse steps with Catherine, I felt like I was heading into battle. "Remember," Catherine murmured, "Judge Hartwell doesn't tolerate games. She's seen every trick. When it comes to hidden assets." Through the glass doors, Marcus sat with Patricia Whitman and 2 other lawyers. He looked haggard, his usually immaculate appearance showing cracks. 3 lawyers, I observed. He's scared. He should be. David's report reads like a map. In financial fraud, Judge Sarah Hartwell took the bench, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and a piercing gaze that suggested she'd heard every lie ever told in her courtroom. "This is an emergency hearing regarding temporary restraining orders in Blackwood versus Blackwood," she announced. "Ms. Morrison, I've reviewed your filing. These are serious allegations." Catherine stood. "Yes, Your Honor, we have compelling evidence that Mr. Blackwood has systematically concealed marital assets through shell companies and offshore accounts. Without immediate intervention, there's substantial risk these assets will be moved beyond this court's jurisdiction." Patricia Whitman rose. "Your Honor, these allegations are unfounded. Mr. Blackwood's business dealings are legitimate and documented. This appears to be a vindictive fishing expedition." "Ms. Whitman," Judge Hartwell interrupted, "I've reviewed the forensic accounting report. Unless you're arguing this David Chen fabricated bank records, I suggest addressing the substance." Rather than attacking Mrs. Blackwood's motives, Patricia's facade wavered. "While there may be complexity in Mr. Blackwood's business structure, there's no evidence of intentional concealment or fraud. Ms. Morrison, I'd like to hear more about this forensic analysis." Catherine approached. With a thick binder, Over the past week, our forensic accountant identified at least 14 separate corporate entities controlled by Mr. Blackwood. 8 appear to have no legitimate business purpose beyond asset concealment. She opened to a large diagram. For example, Blackwood Holdings Limited is a Cayman Islands corporation, established in 2020. No employees, no business operations, no apparent purpose other than receiving transfers from Mr. Blackwood's domestic accounts. How much money, Ms. Morrison? At least $12 million transferred to offshore entities over 5 years. Funds never disclosed on joint tax returns that Mrs. Blackwood was completely unaware of. I watched Marcus's face. His jaw was clenched, hands balled into fists. This was the man who'd suggested an amicable divorce. Judge Hartwell turned to the defense table. Mr. Blackwood, these are serious allegations. I'm giving you an opportunity to respond. Marcus stood slowly. Your Honor, I want to be transparent. Yes, my business includes multiple entities, including offshore structures, but these were established for legitimate tax planning and asset protection. Asset protection from whom, Mr. Blackwood? The question hung like a blade. Marcus's composure slipped from potential business liabilities. My firm manages substantial client assets, and there are always risks, Mr. Blackwood. Are you telling this court you established offshore shell companies to protect marital assets from your wife? No, Your Honor, that's not what I'm saying. Then, perhaps you can explain why your wife knew nothing about these entities or the millions transferred to them. Marcus glanced at Patricia. Your Honor, I handle all complex financial aspects of our marriage. My wife chose to focus on raising our children, and I didn't want to burden her with technical details. The patronizing tone made my blood boil. Even under oath, he couldn't resist portraying me as the little wife who couldn't handle complicated concepts. Mr. Blackwood, are you familiar with fiduciary duty between spouses? Yes, Your Honor. Do you believe secretly transferring millions of marital assets to hidden offshore accounts is consistent with that duty? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Patricia stood quickly. Your Honor, my client was acting on professional advice. There was no intent to defraud Ms. Whitman. I didn't ask about intent. I asked about fiduciary duty. Judge Hartwell's gaze never left Marcus. Mr. Blackwood, I'll ask again. Do you believe your actions were consistent with your fiduciary duty to your wife? Finally, Marcus said quietly, I was trying to protect our family's financial security by hiding assets from half the family. Judge Hartwell had heard enough. The temporary restraining orders will remain in effect. All accounts, domestic and international, associated with any entity controlled by Mr. Blackwood will remain frozen pending full discovery. Additionally, Mr. Blackwood will provide, within 48 hours, Your Honor, freezing all accounts will severely impact Mr. Blackwood's ability to conduct legitimate business. Ms. Whitman, your client should have considered that before establishing what appears to be an elaborate asset concealment scheme. If these entities are legitimate, Mr. Blackwood should have no difficulty explaining their purpose. Judge Hartwell turned back to Marcus. I want to be clear. If this court discovers you failed to disclose any assets, or if you attempt to move, transfer, or liquidate any assets, while these orders are in effect, you will face contempt charges and potential criminal referral. Do you understand? Marcus's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Furthermore, given the complexity and international scope of these arrangements, I'm appointing a special master to oversee asset discovery. The special master will have full authority to examine all financial records, interview relevant parties, and ensure compliance. Leaving the courthouse, I felt like I was walking on air. Marcus's face when Judge Hartwell announced the special master had been worth every sleepless night. That went well, Catherine said with satisfaction. Judge Hartwell doesn't mess around with hidden assets. What happens now? Now we wait for Marcus to comply with disclosure, and we keep digging. David's found connections between your husband's Swiss accounts and high-profile tax avoidance schemes. That evening, I found Marcus surrounded by bankers, boxes, and documents. He looked up with genuine fear in his eyes. Julia, we need to talk. I'm listening, he gestured to the chaos. This is going to destroy everything. My business, my reputation, our children's future. You should have thought about that before hiding $12 million from me. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Marcus. You got greedy. You thought you could dump the wife while keeping all the money? Marcus stood abruptly, sending papers cascading. I never wanted to hurt you. But my business partners, the clients, they're asking questions. Do you know what this scrutiny could do to the firm? I don't care about your firm. You should. If the firm goes under, there won't be any assets left to divide. I studied his face. This time his panic seemed genuine. Are you saying the firm is in trouble? When word gets out that the founding partner is under investigation for financial fraud, Clients get nervous. When clients get nervous, they take their money elsewhere. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had I pushed too hard? But then I remembered the years of lies, the condescending explanations, the assumption that I was too stupid to notice. Marcus, you created this situation. If your clients are asking questions, maybe they should be. He slumped back, looking defeated. What do you want, Julia? What will it take to make this stop? I want the truth. All of it. Every account, every entity, every dollar you've hidden. And then what? Then we'll negotiate a fair settlement. A truly fair settlement based on complete information. Marcus stared at the scattered documents. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. There's more than what David found. My heart started pounding. How much more? A lot. More? The Swiss accounts? The Cayman entities? They're just the beginning. Investment partnerships in Singapore, real estate holdings through Bermuda corporations, even cryptocurrency wallets. Cryptocurrency wallets. I was looking at a stranger. How much? Marcus total. He looked up with hollow eyes. Maybe 40 million. Maybe more. 40 million. While I'd worried about college tuition, Marcus had been sitting on a fortune that could have set our children up for life. $40 million. And you were going to give me 25% of what the assets I knew about. Julia, I never meant for it to get this complicated, Marcus. You didn't just hide money, you stole from our marriage. You stole from our children's future. You made me feel unreasonable for wanting kitchen appliances while hoarding millions in Swiss accounts. I was protecting us, you were protecting yourself. From me, from accountability. From having to share the wealth we built together. Marcus put his head in his hands. What happens now? Now you tell your lawyers everything you just told me, and we let the court decide what fair division looks like. Julia, please. There has to be a way to work this out privately, if this goes public. If there's a trial, then maybe you should have thought about that before committing financial fraud. I left him there and went to check on Emma and Jake. They were both in their rooms, but I could tell from their expressions they'd heard the raised voices. Mom, Emma appeared in her doorway. Is everything okay? I looked at my 17-year-old daughter and felt the weight of my decision. I could lie, could continue pretending everything was fine, or I could trust her with the truth. Actually, Em, I think we need a family meeting, you and Jake. 5 minutes later, we sat in the living room, me on one couch, Emma and Jake on the other, Marcus conspicuously absent. Guys, I need to tell you something important. Your father and I are getting divorced. Jake went completely still. Emma closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. We kinda figured. I'm sorry you had to figure it out instead of hearing it directly. Things have been complicated. How complicated? Emma asked. I took a deep breath. Your father has been hiding money from our family. A lot of money. I've had to hire lawyers and forensic accountants to find out how much and where. Hidden how? Jake asked. Bank accounts in other countries. Fake companies. Investment accounts I didn't know existed. Emma went pale. How much money? Potentially tens of millions of dollars. The silence was deafening. Jake stared like I'd told him we were aliens. Emma looked like she was solving a complex equation. Tens of millions. Jake finally said, like we're rich. We should have been. Yes, but we're not, Emma asked. Your father has been keeping that money separate from our family finances. While I've been budgeting for groceries and worrying about college costs, he's been accumulating a fortune. Emma stood and started pacing. So, all those times he said we couldn't afford things, when he made you feel guilty for wanting to renovate the kitchen, ... He was lying. Yes. That's sick, Jake said, his voice cracking. That's really sick, Mom. I felt tears prick my eyes. I know, sweetheart. Emma stopped pacing. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to make sure he can't hide any more money. And I'm going to fight for a fair settlement. Truly fair, based on all assets, not just the ones he wanted. Me too. Know about. Good, Emma said fiercely. Fight for every penny. That night, Marcus was waiting in our bedroom, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Did you tell them? He asked. Yes. How much? Enough. He nodded slowly. They probably hate me now. They're hurt and confused. But they don't hate you. They're your children, Marcus. But you hate me. I considered the question. I hate what you did. I hate the lies, the manipulation, the assumption that I was too stupid to figure it out. But you're the father of my children. I don't hate you, Marcus. I just don't know who you are anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. I'll comply with the court order. I'll disclose everything, all of it. All of it. The Singapore partnerships, the crypto wallets, the real estate holdings, everything. I studied his face for signs of deception. All I saw was exhaustion and defeat. Why? Why now? Because you're right. This has gone too far. And because I saw how Emma and Jake looked at me tonight. Like they didn't recognize me. Like I was a stranger in my own house. You are a stranger, Marcus. The man I married wouldn't have done this. Maybe the man you married never existed. The sadness in his voice was genuine, and for a moment I felt an echo of the love I'd once felt for him. But it was just an echo, overwhelmed by reality. Maybe not. I agreed. But the woman you married definitely existed. And she's not going to let you cheat her out of half of everything we built together. Marcus stood slowly. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight? 3 weeks ago, I'd been a suburban housewife worrying about PTA meetings. Now, I was in the middle of a legal battle involving millions in international financial fraud. But for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not Marcus's wife, not just Emma and Jake's mother, but Julia Blackwood, the forensic accountant who had once been damn good at her job. Tomorrow, Marcus would provide complete financial disclosure. Tomorrow, we would find out exactly how much he had hidden. And tomorrow, we would begin unwinding 12 years of lies. I was terrified, but I was also exhilarated. For the first time in my marriage, all the cards were on the table and I was holding a winning hand. The war room at Catherine Morrison's law firm looked like a military command center. 3 tables covered with documents, multiple screens displaying financial flowcharts, and a whiteboard covered with what looked like a complex family tree of corporate entities. David Chen stood at the center, pointing to connections with the enthusiasm of a detective who'd cracked the case of the century. It's beautiful, he said, admiration in his voice, diabolical but beautiful. Your husband created one of the most sophisticated asset concealment schemes I've ever seen. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus provided his complete financial disclosure. 2 weeks of revelations that left me reeling and increasingly furious. The $40 million he'd confessed to had turned out to be just the beginning. Show me the Singapore structure again, Catherine said, studying the whiteboard. David pointed to interconnected boxes. Blackwood Asia Holdings is the parent company incorporated in Singapore. 6 subsidiary companies, each technically owned by the next, creating a chain almost impossible to trace. Singapore law allows beneficial ownership to be completely obscured. Through nominee directors, how much is flowing through Singapore? I asked. Approximately $18 million over 4 years. All profits from Marcus's investment advisory business that never appeared on your joint tax returns. $18 million. That was enough to buy multiple houses, fund both kids' college educations, travel the world, never worry about money again. Instead, it had been sitting in hidden accounts while I clipped coupons in the cryptocurrency, Catherine asked. David's grin was predatory. That's where Marcus got greedy. He thought crypto wallets were untraceable, but the blockchain is a permanent record of every transaction. We've identified at least 12 wallets with combined value of approximately $8 million. The blockchain records are permanent. I asked, completely. Every Bitcoin transaction since the beginning is recorded and publicly viewable, so we can trace when Marcus bought the cryptocurrency, not just where the money came from. And Julia, this is where it gets interesting. David pulled up a computer screen showing complex transaction history. Marcus has been using cryptocurrency to launder money through shell companies, transfer funds from domestic accounts to offshore entities, convert to cryptocurrency, then convert back to traditional currency in different jurisdictions. I stared at the screen, watching digital breadcrumbs of my husband's financial crimes. That's money laundering, isn't it? Textbook money laundering, Catherine confirmed, and it's a federal crime. Federal crime meant potential criminal charges, FBI investigations, and possible prison time. Our family's name in newspapers and our children's lives turned upside down. Catherine, what are the chances this stays a civil matter? Honestly, slim to none. David's analysis shows clear evidence of tax evasion, money laundering, and wire fraud. The Southern District takes financial crimes seriously, especially involving these amounts. Somewhere out there, Marcus was in his own war room trying to figure out how to minimize damage from his crumbling house of cards. Julia, David interrupted my thoughts. There's something else. The special master wants to interview you tomorrow. The special master, Margaret Walsh, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for being absolutely relentless with financial fraud. What kind of interview? She wants to know everything you remember about Marcus's business dealings, travel, patterns, financial discussions, anything that might help her understand the full scope of concealment. Emma and Jake were protective of me in a way that broke my heart, bringing me tea while I worked on legal documents, taking over household chores, speaking in hushed tones about their father. Mom, Emma said, as we cleaned up, I've been thinking about college. What about it? Maybe I should stay local. Go to NYU or Columbia. That way I could help with Jake. And ... Emma, stop. I put down the dish I was washing. You are not changing your college plans because of this situation, but if Dad goes to prison, if your father goes to prison, we'll figure it out. But you are 17 years old and your job is to be 17. To dream big and plan for your future? I'm almost 18, Mom. I'm not a kid anymore. I looked at my daughter, this poised, intelligent young woman trying so hard to be the adult in our chaotic family. No, you're not a kid anymore, but you're still my child and I will not let your father's poor choices derail your dreams. Do you understand? Emma nodded, but I could see the worry. What if there's no money for college? If all the accounts are frozen? Emma, here's what's going to happen. Your father has hidden approximately $60 million from our family. The court is going to order him to divide those assets fairly. Even if he keeps half, we'll have more than enough for both you and Jake to go to any college you want. 60 million. Jake appeared in the doorway, obviously eavesdropping. Did you say 60 million? I sighed. Yes, the forensic accountants keep finding more money. Jesus, Jake breathed, then quickly looked at me. Sorry, Mom. It's okay, sweetheart. I think the situation calls for some strong language. We were interrupted by Marcus appearing in the doorway. He looked haggard, his usually perfect appearance showing strain. His eyes went to the kids, and I saw pain when he realized they were both unconsciously moving closer to me. Kids, he said softly, can I talk to you for a minute? Emma and Jake exchanged glances. Finally, Emma nodded. Okay. They sat at the kitchen table, Marcus on one side, the kids on the other, with me leaning against the counter. The positioning felt symbolic of how our family had realigned. I know you've heard things lately, Marcus began carefully. About money, about business dealings, about mistakes I've made. Mistakes. Emma's voice was sharp. Dad, you didn't make mistakes. You lied to us for years. Marcus flinched. You're right. I lied. I justified it by telling myself I was protecting the family, but that was just another lie. I was protecting myself. From what? Jake asked. From having to share control? From having to explain decisions? From having to admit that I liked having that secret power, that private wealth that was just mine? It was the most honest thing I'd heard Marcus say in years. Why? Emma asked, her voice cracking. We trusted you. We believed you when you said we had to be careful with money, when you said we couldn't afford things, and the whole time you were hoarding millions like some kind of dragon sitting on gold. Marcus winced at the accuracy. I don't know why. I wish I had a better answer, but the truth is, I got addicted to it. To the secrecy, to the control, to feeling smarter than everyone else. Including Mom? Jake asked. Marcus's eyes found mine. Especially your mother. She was smart enough to figure out what I was doing if she'd been looking. But I wasn't looking, I said. Because I trusted you. Yes, and I exploited that trust. In the worst possible way. We sat in silence. Finally, Emma spoke. What happens now, Dad? Now I try to make it right. I cooperate with the investigation, provide complete disclosure, and accept whatever consequences come. What kind of consequences? Jake asked. Fear? In his voice, Marcus looked at me, silently asking permission to be honest. I nodded. I might go to prison, he said simply. What I did wasn't just lying to your mother, it was tax evasion and money laundering. Those are federal crimes. Emma went pale. For how long? I don't know. Depends on how cooperative I am. Whether I can make restitution, how prosecutors decide to proceed. Dad, Jake said, his voice small, I'm scared. Marcus's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he reached across the table. I know, buddy, I'm scared too, but here's what I want you to remember. This is my fault. My choices, my consequences. Your mother is incredibly strong and smart, and she's going to take care of you no matter what happens to me. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. Despite everything Marcus had done, watching him break down in front of our children was painful. This was still Jake's father, Emma's dad. We're going to be okay, I said to all of them. Whatever happens, we're going to be okay. The next morning, I sat across from Margaret Walsh in her temporary office at the federal courthouse. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and piercing intelligence. Mrs. Blackwood, I've reviewed the forensic analysis. It's comprehensive, but I suspect there are details about your husband's behavior not captured in bank records. What kind of details? Travel patterns? Business trips that seemed unusually long or frequent? Phone calls at odd hours? Meetings with people you didn't recognize? I closed my eyes, thinking back. He traveled a lot for business. Singapore, Switzerland, the Cayman Islands. I never questioned it because his work required international travel. How often? Maybe 6 or 8 times a year, sometimes more. Margaret made notes. Did he ever suggest you accompany him? Never. He always said they were intensive business trips that I'd be bored, that it would be better if I stayed home with the kids. And you accepted that? At the time, yes. Marcus had a way of making me feel needy or unreasonable if I questioned his schedule. Margaret nodded knowingly. Common pattern. The spouse creates a dynamic where questioning becomes a personal failing. Tell me about his home office habits. He worked late most nights. Door closed. Very private. If I interrupted, he'd get irritated. Say he was dealing with sensitive client information. Did he receive packages at home? Documents? Equipment? Anything unusual? I thought about it actually. Yes, he had a lot of packages delivered to his office instead of the house. I asked once, and he said it was more secure, more professional. In the months leading up to your husband asking for a divorce, did you notice changes in his behavior? Increased travel? More phone calls? More time in his office? I thought back to the last year of our marriage, actually. Yes. He was traveling more frequently, and when he was home, he was more secretive, more protective of his phone, his computer. And he started talking more about diversification, about protecting our assets from potential risks. What kind of risks? He said the economy was unstable, that we needed to be prepared for market volatility. But now I wonder if he was actually preparing for divorce, trying to move assets before I could claim them. Margaret's smile was grim. That's exactly what he was doing. Based on my analysis, your husband has been systematically moving assets offshore for at least 2 years, with the pace accelerating in the 6 months before he asked for a divorce. The realization hit like a punch. He planned this. The whole thing. The divorce, the hidden assets, the settlement offer. It was all planned. I'm afraid so. Your husband is a very sophisticated financial criminal, Mrs. Blackwood. This wasn't opportunity or momentary lapse. This was a carefully orchestrated scheme to defraud you of your marital assets. I left the meeting feeling sick. The Marcus I'd married might not have been capable of this deception, but the Marcus I'd been living with clearly was. My phone buzzed. With a text from Catherine, emergency hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m., Judge Hartwell wants to address new findings. This is it, Julia. This is when we drop the hammer. That afternoon, David called with an update that left me speechless. Julia, we found the crown jewel. Marcus has been using a family trust to hide assets, but he made one crucial mistake. He named Emma and Jake as beneficiaries. What does that mean? It means legally. A significant portion of the hidden assets actually belong to your children, not Marcus. He can't claim them in the divorce because they're not his to claim. I felt savage satisfaction. Marcus's own greed had led him to create legal structures that would ultimately benefit the very people he'd been trying to cheat. How much? Approximately $15 million. And here's the beautiful part. As the children's mother and guardian, you'll have legal authority to manage those assets until they reach majority. $15 million that Marcus couldn't touch, couldn't hide, couldn't bargain with. $15 million that would secure Emma and Jake's futures no matter what happened to their father. David, sometimes I think you're a genius. Sometimes I think, so too, but Julia, there's something else. The FBI has officially opened an investigation. They want to interview you next week. The FBI, the word sent a chill down my spine, but also a thrill of anticipation. Marcus had thought he was untouchable, protected by complexity and my supposed ignorance, but the walls were closing in that evening. I found myself at the windows of our penthouse apartment, looking out at city lights, just as I had the night Marcus first asked for a divorce, but everything was different now. I was different now. I wasn't the trusting wife who had believed her husband's lies. I wasn't the suburban mother who worried about grocery budgets while her husband hoarded millions. I was Julia Blackwood, forensic accountant, and I had just dismantled one of the most sophisticated asset concealment schemes in New York legal history. Tomorrow, Judge Hartwell would hear about the FBI investigation, the family trust, the full scope of Marcus's deception. Tomorrow, Marcus would learn that his carefully constructed empire of lies was crumbling. And tomorrow, I would walk out of that courthouse knowing I had fought for my children's future and one Marcus had underestimated me for the last time. He'd thought he could outsmart me, outmaneuver me, intimidate me into accepting his terms. Instead, I had just delivered checkmate. The game was over, and I had won.